Tozer. Getting right into Tozer. As the Lord would speak to us and share what His heart is and where His mindset is for giving to us today His Word as it fits in your life and as the Holy Spirit causes it to be a part of your place where you're at as well as in mine. Church must discern between popularity and greatness. If any man serve me, let him follow me, and where I am, there shall also be my servant. If any man serve me, him will my Father honor. John 12:26. Human society generally has fallen into the error of assuming that greatness and fame are the same thing. Americans appear to take for granted that each generation provides a certain number of quote-unquote superior men, and the democratic processes unerringly find those men and set them in places of prominence. How wrong people can get it. We have but to become acquainted with or even listen to the big names of our times to discover how wretchedly inferior most of them are. Many appear to have arrived at their present eminence by pull, brass, nerve, gall, and lucky accident. If we would see life steadily and see it whole, we must make a stern effort to break away from the power of that false philosophy that equates greatness with fame. Just because someone is famous doesn't make them great. The two may be and often are oceans and continents apart. If the church were a body wholly unaffected by the world, we could toss the above problem out over to the secular philosophers. But the truth is that the church also suffers from this evil notion. We want those who are great and tickle our ears. Christians have fallen into the habit of accepting the nosiest and most notorious among them as the best and the greatest. They too have learned to equate popularity with excellence. In open defiance of the Sermon on the Mount, they have given their approval not to the meek, but to the self-assertive, not to the mourner, but to the self-assured, not to the pure in heart who see God, but to the publicity hunters who seek headlines. Not much can be said about a man of God, except that if he's a man of God, then he should be a man with God, and he should be a man that God works through. More often than not, you'll find that charisma, popularity, worship services, seeker-friendly, whatever you want to call the New Age movement, is part of the church in the Old Age movement too. Because in every circumstance where we try to point the finger at the church and say, oh, but they've adapted to make it easier for people to get saved, they've also adapted in the old days, in the old ways, the same thing to make it more convenient for people to come to church. Because you see, there's something that's forgotten. No matter how you get a person into church, once they are in church, then God can work on them. But when you don't have someone in church, then it's harder to have the Holy Spirit deal with them. So a lot of times the church has sought other ways and other perspectives to deal with sharing the gospel. But the bottom line is, it's not about the church, because it's about you. What are you doing? What have you done with Jesus today? Because if you shared with your family, as the Sermon on the Mount said, if you've gone to your loved ones, if you shared with your neighbor, if you've done the things that Jesus said, then the church isn't so important as the reality of knowing the person that you know and live next door to. It becomes a higher priority that you do what Jesus said, as opposed to what the church has done, or the church may be doing, or failing to do. Because when you look at people in general, popularity does guide their decisions, which is another reason why democracy doesn't work. But the point is, when God directs a person, then He will lift them up or set them down as He chooses. So the difference is a personal relationship with God individually and not corporately. So while you may feel good in the church that you're in, which may be popular or not, which may be large or not, which may be famous or not, I have been in and with the famous and the infamous, as well as the large and the small. And I have found this true to be in every example. The person who knows Jesus does what Jesus says. The person who doesn't know Jesus does what the people say. And whatever causes less people to follow Jesus, like he did make that distinction, then you will find the reality of people growing in God as opposed to knowing about God. Because sometimes you have to say things that aren't pleasant to be heard in order for people to know whether they have a personal relationship with God or a personal relationship with the pastor. You need to have God in you to know the difference, because otherwise you may be worshiping idols. And in America, most of Christianity is worshiping idols. And we make our people that are in the forefront of our minds, the people that are standing on stage, more idols than they are leaders, and more worshipped than we are worshiping God. It's a careful distinction, but it's a real problem in the church today. And it always has been and always will be, as long as we put people up on the pedestal rather than put God in his place.